Thanks for attending our panel on this very early hour here at MAGFest.
Very, very surreal to be on the other side of this table for once. Thank you all for coming to DK Vine Live at MAGFest and our panel, the Kiddy Kong Appreciation Panel.
Yeah. Cameron, I don't know if you know this, Cameron, but I'm cosplaying as Kiddy Kong right now. I'm wearing diapers.
So that's on, okay. So yeah, we're actually here to discuss.
Yeah, we're here to discuss. So our website, DK Vine, just turned 20 this past August. So we're here to try to make sense of our lives and where it went wrong. My name is Hyle Russell. I co-founded DK Vine with my friend Chad back in 1999, and I'm also the host of the Conversation podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcast or any reputable vendor.
And I'm Cameron Regal. I am a site editor at DK Vine, and I've been given the official title by my fellow site staffer, Matt Corna, of doing coloring in, which means that I do a lot of the graphic design for the site. Any of the banners you see at the top of the site when you visit it currently, assuming it's up, are my work. And I'm also a recurring co-host of the Conversation podcast.
That's a pun, too, if you hadn't realized. Conversation. It's very, very humorous. All right, so yeah, basically the heart of DK Vine is, of course, the Donkey Kong Country series, which just turned 25 years old late November.
That's exactly when I turned to dust.
So Donkey Kong Country, when it came out back in 1994, obviously it was a huge hit, but it seemed like it spoke to me in this weird way of this gorilla wearing a tie, going around riding ostriches. It was a game that somehow I had been waiting for my entire young life at that point. And I knew after I played it that I would have to play every single game that would come out in this series afterward. I made a vow, a solemn oath, like Bruce Wayne, over the bodies of his parents to avenge them, that I would play every Donkey Kong Country game ever. And I didn't realize what that vow would actually entail, but we'll get into that.
So, obviously, DK Vine wasn't founded until 1999, but we felt it important to cover the Donkey Kong Country series in the context of when it came out, and we understand some of the audience may have been too young or not around at all to have experienced the level of intensity that was Donkey Kong Country mania in 1994.
Yeah, so for about 2 blissful years, Donkey Kong seemed like it was actually the main IP of Nintendo. Mario was in this weird state where you had Yoshi's Island, Super Mario RPG, but it seemed like all of the marketing focus, at least here in the States, was on Donkey Kong Country.
So to fully immerse you in the mania of the time, we prepared a quick-fire best hits collection from the promotional Nintendo Power video, Donkey Kong Country Exposed.
That's right.
These are just a highlight reel, but we fully recommend you look up the full version of the video on your own. And here we go.
Nope.
Oh, there we go. Here we go.
Oh, we don't have audio.
Oh, we don't have audio now. Good pod, good pod. Yes, it is.
Well,
do we have a tech here?
we could probably just do we want to do a lip reading of this, or no?
Do it.
All right, so this is Tim Stamper at Rare. He's calling Josh Wolf, who's this flannel-clad host of this, and explaining that they went to the zoo to best animate the characters of Donkey Kong Country. And then, yeah, he's very impressed that they went to the zoo. Look at that. And then he goes to the zoo, and he's harassing the gorillas. And zoo security is going to evict him. Yeah, and then that's how yeah, look at that. That was state-of-the-art graphics in 1994, right there. Look at that. Look at that butt. All right, and then he's talking to this guy. I don't know what that's about. All right, and then.
Hey, oh, there we go. Here we go.
You get paid. Fried green bananas, bananas au gratin. Video game music should draw you into the game. In Donkey Kong Country, we had graphics that were way beyond anything else that's ever been done. We were also hoping to get some music better than anything that's ever been done. This music, for example, is very upbeat, fits with the jungle. It's an early level. The level's not very hard. The music is kind of nice. Okay, now here we have the music that goes with the water level. Now in this level, you've just finished a really, really hard level in the game. We use this music and this fairly easy level as kind of a reward. Because the music is so good, we're putting this music on a CD. You know, something that's big in Japan for many, many years is game music on CD. Hasn't been a big hit in America because maybe the music hasn't been quite up to what you hear on the radio is every daytime. You're kind of losing it, dude.
It's not on 32X adapters.
Thank you, Donkey Kong, for the Colossus roar.
Yeah, so yeah, that was very impressive to us back in 1994. We were a simpler folk back then, but that really got the blood pumping for this new IP, or reinvented IP.
So, just some quick highlights of DKC Mania. These are. This is from CES 1994, the release of Donkey Kong Country. Nintendo was promoting the game. They had a very elaborate setup outside of Donkey Kong's treehouse with ambient jungle noises and shaking treehouse of Donkey Kong enjoying himself. This is a family-friendly panel. Also present was the Donkey Kong in real-time experience, aka DIRT, where a motion capture Donkey Kong floating head would interact with guests as they came by with animation and audio, actually provided by Charles Martinet, voice of Mario. This was mainly used to hit on the guests.
Yeah, it's what Charles Martinet doesn't want you to look up on YouTube. It's aged very well.
But yeah, we had said Donkey Kong had kind of superseded Mario's role in Nintendo's marketing, and I don't think anything says that better than Mario's voice coming out of Donkey Kong.
Right. So I made that vow to play every Donkey Kong Country game, and up until this point, that included Donkey Kong Country and the Game Boy handheld's Donkey Kong Land. And then he made a brief appearance in Mario Kart 64. Rare actually provided the 3D model in that game, so I had to get that as well. That actually got me to get an N64. But later that year, we had a new game called Diddy Kong Racing, which kind of opened up a new era where it introduced two new characters to the canon Banjo the Bear and Conquer the Squirrel. And of course, they already had games in development at Rare. Due to the release cycle, both games were delayed, and Diddy Kong Racing came to fill in the whole Banjo-Kazooie left that holiday season. So Banjo actually debuted in Diddy Kong Racing, and my own twisted logic, I said, well, that means Banjo is a Donkey Kong character, so I've got to then follow him and conquer.
More on that in a bit. We'll go back to the other game that released in this period, the other Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong 64, which led to the founding of DK Vine.
Yeah, so in 1999, this game that I was incredibly hyped for, Donkey Kong 64, was coming out. And I believe there's a panel here at MAGFest that actually gets into, they debate the merits of the quality of that game, so we won't really belabor that. We don't want to steal their thunder. But Donkey Kong 64, it seemed like it was going to be a big deal at the time, so I was finally online thanks to those millions of AOL free trial discs that were going around at the time, and I was like, it would be really cool to start a website where I get to just vomit out my love for this nonsense, and hopefully people will read it. So I founded DK Vine with my friend Chad in 1999, ostensibly in the build-up to Donkey Kong 64.
And I think a huge influence of DK Vine then, and one that has influenced us to this day, was Rare's own web presence in the late 90s.
Yeah, so Rare's own website back then, it was manned by one guy called Lee Loveday, and he's still at Rare today, and he's on their community team, but he wrote this entire website usually as an exercise to yell at the stupid kids who would write into Rare asking them questions.
Slushy in that excerpt you see on screen refers to Heil,
yeah,
teenage
so,
Heil.
Right, so I got yelled at every month by him, which was just a dream come true. But it was basically like having a whole website written by Cranky Kong, so of course that then influenced me greatly when creating my own website.
So at this point in time, Rare and Nintendo were kind of inextricably linked. I think we all thought of Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, Joanna Dark all as Nintendo characters, Nintendo staples. These are actually photographs taken, I believe, circa 2003 of Nintendo's Redmond headquarters. This is probably when they were overdue for a remodel for reasons that became apparent in 2002. When this happened,
again?
Well, you're telling your son gone into the Xbox Live thing.
This guy. What's he talking about? I can't understand the word. Right, that's it. Okay, Pat Boy, out of the way. Yes. Marvelous.
Yeah, so in 2002, Rare was looking for a buyer to someone so they could be owned outright by a company. And Nintendo, they were going through a lot of changes at the time. They weren't interested, so it was actually the upstart Xbox that purchased Rare, and kind of, it was like a divorce of our family. Our lovely fictional family was torn apart, and it was the most traumatic thing to young me. I say young, I was like 18 at the time, but whatever. It made me grow up real fast. But yeah, so we were in a new era of Donkey Kong and the properties we claimed spun off from Donkey Kong.
So we've compiled a list of Donkey Kong titles that came out in the era of time we on the site called the buyout era. There is a lot of Donkey Kong games in this era, but you'll notice a distinct lack of a 2D Donkey Kong Country platformer.
Yeah, so basically they married Donkey Kong to a bongo peripheral on the GameCube, and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat's a really fun game. It's something I've really warmed up to over the years. But at the time, telling me that our big Donkey Kong game for this generation was controlled by banging on bongos and had no returning characters from the previous games.
Which we would later find out was a well-intentioned creative decision not to step on Rare's toes that was kind of misdelivered to us back in the day as teenagers.
Yeah.
And as angsty teenagers, maybe had attitudes we regret about that.
Right, yeah, you want to talk about ugly fan bases, look at the Donkey Kong fan base back then. But yeah, we got over it. But yeah, there's the Donkey Konga games, which I still hate. And then there were the pay-on games, DK King of Swing, DK Jungle Climber.
So DK King of Swing actually meant a lot to me. It's what helped me get into DK Vine. My fandom for Donkey Kong had kind of lapsed in the mid-2000s because the games just weren't on my radar. And this colorful 2D game where Donkey Kong swings on floating pegs really got my attention, had a really charming art style. But Donkey Kong in this era was kind of, it didn't have a developer to call home, so it didn't really have that core game needed to unite everything else around it.
Right, so we basically rebranded the site at this time and called it Donkey Kong Universe because we thought, Nintendo's not going to make a Donkey Kong Country game. We need to focus on the spin-off titles like Banjo and Conquer because surely we'll have lots and lots of titles on the Xbox. After all, why would they buy Rare if we weren't going to get loads of sequels? But the Donkey Kong universe, so Cameron, do you want to start explaining this inane concept?
I mean, it's your baby, but okay.
I disown it.
So the Donkey Kong universe it's not a physical universe, although you can certainly look at it through that lens.
Yeah, so this is art Cameron did of what we refer to as the Rare Archipelago. So if you actually read the lore, the instruction manuals of things like Diddy Kong Racing, all of the home islands of all of these characters, they actually all exist in the same chain of islands. So you've got Donkey Kong Island, you've got the Isle of Hags for Banjo, you've got basically nearly everything Rare's done in the last 25 years.
So when we say the Donkey Kong universe, as DK Vine defines it, though, isn't a physical universe, it's a concept of interlinked physical character appearances that kind of mostly serve to dictate what content is covered on DK Vine as a site.
Right, because the way games operate now, especially with things like Smash Brothers, if we were to actually break it down and say we're going to cover everything that exists in the same universe or the same multiverse, that would be literally every single game franchise at this point. We would have nothing to do with Donkey Kong. We'd be talking about Shovel Knight 24/7.
We would essentially be Mario Wiki, which isn't a bad thing, but Mario Wiki's got that base covered.
Right, so basically our logic is that if a character spins out or debuts in a game and then gets another appearance in another game, that game is part of the Donkey Kong universe. So it starts off simple enough, right? Diddy Kong debuted in Donkey Kong Country. He later got his own game, Diddy Kong Racing. Makes sense, right? This isn't stupid yet.
But as we previously established, Diddy Kong was not the only major character in Diddy Kong Racing.
Yes. And so 1998 saw this little...
First, there was Donkey and Diddy Kong. Then Diddy and Dixie, Dixie and Kitty, Mario and Yoshi. Okay, you get the point. So what's the big deal? Well, listen up, because there's a new dynamic duo from the creators of Donkey Kong Country and GoldenEye that's ready to kick some serious excitement into Nintendo 64. It's Banjo-Kazooie!
Yeah, that was SNL funny man John Lovett slumming it, recording a VHS promotional tape for Banjo-Kazooie in 1998.
So yeah, Banjo-Kazooie would be the next major branch in the Donkey Kong universe after Donkey Kong.
And this made sense because like Banjo-Kazooie, it was being the team that handled it at Rare was the same team essentially that did Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2, headed up by Greg Mayles on design. So there's a lot of Donkey Kong Country DNA in Banjo-Kazooie. So it all felt like it was part of the same tapestry.
And in addition to Banjo, another character to make his debut in Diddy Kong Racing was the much beloved Conker the Squirrel.
Right. So, of course, Conker went on his own trajectory.
Yes, Conker had a game you might have heard of, very subversive. It was called Conker's Pocket Tales on the Game Boy Color.
Conker's Pocket Tales came out in 1999. Of course, we're all big fans of Conker's Pocket Tales. I don't need to go into that, but came out for the Game Boy Color, and then other stuff happened after that. The game that was actually in development for the N64, which was Conker's Quest, and then it got renamed 12 Tales Conker 64. Banjo-Kazooie kind of stole all of its thunder, so they were struggling for an identity, and of course it got the mature-rated rebranding as Conker's Bad Fur Day.
So between the purchase of Rare by Microsoft and Conker's complete rebranding with Bad Fur Day, you might think the connections established in Diddy Kong Racing are kind of thoroughly severed, but they've been pretty well maintained since. Rare has gone out of their way to reference Banjo and Conker's appearances post their buyout. Nuts and Bolts features a sequence where Banjo directly remembers a situation racing a genie and a giant pig. Anytime they have to acknowledge Banjo's debut in historical context, it's always Diddy Kong Racing. And in the promotional period leading up to the release of Conker Live and Reloaded on the original Xbox, Rare released a sort of like long-form statement from Conker himself.
A press release, yeah.
In which he addresses the elephant in the room.
Taj.
And elaborates a bit on his history in Diddy Kong Racing. He said it was his first appearance. He's a very different person, Squirrel. He wouldn't hang out with any of those characters today. And last he heard, at least one of them was in jail.
And we later found out, actually, from Lee Loveday, that the character from Diddy Kong Racing who went to prison was Bumper the Badger. I'm not making this up. This is canon. Bumper the Badger for indecent exposure.
This has been an evolving story. In recent years, we've learned he is now out of prison, but kind of struggling to make his way through life.
It's hard for an ex-con. So this is where it gets stupid. So Rare had a game in development called Dinosaur Planet. And it sounds like some of you are aware of this history. Dinosaur Planet, not a lot of people know this, it actually started off life. It was made by the Diddy Kong Racing team, and it was originally going to star Timber the Tiger as his own spinoff, because originally Timber was the star of Diddy Kong Racing until Miyamoto said, hey, you should put Diddy in it. And so then Diddy kind of
Timber's
stole...
0-2.
Yeah, Diddy kind of stole Timber's thunder, and then they developed this game starring Timber that was going to also feature the Diddy Kong Racing boss character, Tricky the Triceratops, the cheating dinosaur who we all hate.
And at some point, that game became its own original IP, Dinosaur Planet, a kind of mix of fantasy and sci-fi.
Right. Now Timber became the character Saber, but he still had a dinosaur companion named Tricky.
And you might notice Saber looks strikingly like another furry mascot character who was prominent on the Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
Eventually, an opportunity was seen, and Dinosaur Planet became Star Fox Adventures, starring Fox McCloud.
Also featuring a dinosaur companion named Tricky. Now, so there's no reason why there would be a character in Star Fox Adventures called Tricky, because the reason this dinosaur is called Tricky is because he cheats. He cheats at racing go-karts. So our logic is it's the same dinosaur. Now, granted, Tricky is like, what, 5 years old in Star Fox Adventures?
And maybe a different breed of dinosaur.
He's an alien dinosaur. It doesn't matter. It's an alien planet. It doesn't matter. So our logic is that, okay, if this is a young Tricky, obviously the same Tricky from Diddy Kong Racing, if you look at the development history, that means Star Fox Adventures and the entirety of the Star Fox series is actually a prequel to Donkey Kong Country.
It's fun this way.
Yeah.
So, we've established that a character appearing in another game can make that a Donkey Kong Universe title. Logic follows that character appears in another game that's a sequel to the previous game they appeared in. That title is also Donkey Kong Universe, as is the case with Banjo-Tooie, shown here.
Yes, so Banjo-Tooie actually gave us many, many gifts and many, many more games to talk about and confuse people when they click on our website and wonder why we're not talking about Donkey Kong.
So another way that these is if a major character has a sequel to their own game. What happens when these brand new games themselves introduce new characters who then appear in other games?
Just keeps going.
And that's a category we file on the site under a category we call Fish and Chaps.
Now let me explain. So Banjo has a pet goldfish in these games named Royston. And Royston usually ends up barbecued at the end of every Banjo-Kazooie game by the supporting characters. They all have a celebration and they kidnap his fish and they stick it on the grill. He always survives somehow, but...
And Mr. Pants was created as a mascot for Rare's survey page on their website and really, really took off from there.
So then in Banjo-Tooie, in Boggy the Bear's igloo, on his television, we've got the character of Mr. Pants dancing back and forth, and apparently this is a popular television program that these characters watch. This nearly nude, pasty British man in a bowler hat, dancing, gyrating, doing what he wants, but everybody loves it. They can't stop watching it. And
this was the first time the character physically appeared in a game, like verifiably. There had been nods to him in other stuff. There was a Jet Force Gemini code that made the ants look like him.
But that doesn't count. So Mr. Pants.
This kind of cemented Mr. Pants as his first physical appearance. He appears with all the other characters who appear in the game in the credits.
Right, so obviously this is ripe for a spin-off, right? So why wouldn't you make a game with this character? And they did. It's called It's Mr. Pants. It released in the mid-2000s, distributed by THQ. I think there was like 15 copies in production. But yeah, it was a game that existed. And it's actually a really fun puzzle game.
A charming gem of a game if you can find it.
Yeah. Woo! All right, so yeah, Grab by the Ghoulies. Yeah, so who here has beat Challenge 21 in Grab by the Ghoulies? Show of hands. Yeah! All right, so Grab by the Ghoulies was the first game Rare made for the Xbox. And it was made by the Banjo team at that. So
from the creators of Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie,
right.
You know, I think that was kind of understated in the marketing. Within Grab by the Ghoulies are a lot of very indulgent references to Rare's past games, very specifically Banjo.
Yes, yeah, and as we already established, like making a sly reference doesn't count in our idea of what a shared universe should be. You've got to have an actual physical character appearance. And luckily, somebody at Rare agreed because Royston the Goldfish is found in a classroom in this haunted mansion because every haunted mansion has to educate its children. And we've got the same animations for Royston in Grab by the Ghoulies as in Banjo-Kazooie on the file select screen.
And Royston has kind of become the iconic, well-traveled character in the Donkey Kong universe. He's appeared in a lot of games, including Viva Pinata, apparently.
Yeah, so at Viva Pinata, there was going to be a fish pinata that they ended up scrapping, but they kept one in and they stuck it on this character,
Miss Petula.
Miss Petula, thank you, on her head. And it was actually retconned by Lee Loveday on Rare's website that it was Royston disguised as a piñata, I think to hide from the people who were trying to cook him.
And this was convenient for us because Viva Pinata kind of created like a schism on DK Vine for a little bit, because it was a game that beat you over the head with the fact that it happened in the same universe physically as Banjo-Kazooie and certain other games, but it didn't seem to have a returning character.
Until it did, yeah, luckily for us. So yeah, Royston has gone on to kind of become an in-joke among developers at Rare and even ex-Rare developers. And so that has created numerous titles that we consider part of the Donkey Kong universe.
Yeah, you can kind of see, we can't possibly lay out every Donkey Kong universe game. We'd be here all day, but just to give you a glimpse at the utter absurdity.
We did apply for a 5-hour panel, but MAGFest said no.
That is a lie. They've been very great to us.
All right, so all this being said, we haven't really talked about Donkey Kong because, unless you wanted to see me try to beat Donkey Kong at 2 here on stage, there wasn't really a lot to do in that era. But in 2010, oh, it's 10 years ago, geez. 2010, they announced at E3 that Retro Studios from Texas was developing the next iteration of Donkey Kong Country at long last, called Donkey Kong Country Returns. And funnily enough, we showed the DKC exposed VHS at the top of this, and we were having some sound problems, but there was a guy who appeared in that talking about bananas.
Fried green bananas, bananas au gratin.
Yeah, so that actually, he is Michael Kelbau, and he went on to become the president of Retro Studios. And he was the one who pushed for Donkey Kong Country Returns. So a little bit of interesting history there.
He did work with Rare back in the day. His voice is actually found in the game Blast Corps. He provided voice acting for that. So Returns kind of saw a renewed enthusiasm for DK Vine.
Yeah, so I came back I was out in Hollywood for a couple years, and I was like, I actually was, but I was like, you know what, I'm really excited about Donkey Kong, I miss my childhood, I want to come back to the site and talk about this. So I came back to DK Vine, and we rebranded the site around Donkey Kong once again, because at this point, Rare was kind of going through a bit of a restructuring period after not gaining traction really on anything with the Xbox, so they were stuck making games for the Kinect at the time.
And while very fun games, I played Kinect Sports Rivals, and I think it is maybe the best version of its kind of game.
Best bowling ever, from what I hear. But
on any platform.
Yeah, but yeah, there wasn't really a lot to talk about from the spin-off games at this time, but luckily we had a new Donkey Kong Country game, so all was well.
And it turns out we would get another Donkey Kong Country game in what kicked off what we have kind of called on the site the Renaissance era.
That's another clever pun.
So, yeah, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, released for the Wii U, developed again by Retro Studios.
Yeah, it came out in 2014. It was announced at E3 2013. And I mean, we were excited, like the fan base was hyped up, but I think everybody was really jazzed up for this game.
Universal enthusiasm is what this announcement was met with. Complete, utter, absolute enthusiasm.
They didn't ruin our fun, though. But yeah, the big news about Tropical Freeze, of course, was that not only was Dixie Kong going to be a playable character, and come to find out later, Cranky Kong, but they procured the talents of David Wise.
Shown here in his only photo available on the internet.
Yeah, David Wise, who is here at MAGFest, performing 11:30 tonight. So check that out. But yeah, so David Wise, that was a big day for our fandom because, yeah, we didn't have the Kremlings in the game. Yeah, this and that. Nope, not enough animal buddies. But hey, David Wise doing the music is like, I think one of my favorite video game soundtracks, Tropical Freeze. So
Absolutely.
it all worked out.
So Retro pulled a lot of elements that we loved from the 90s back in Tropical Freeze, and DK Vine kind of followed suit in its latest revision.
Right, and around this time we also kind of re-embraced the Rare side of things too, which we'll get into. But yeah, so this like kicked off a new era, and Cameron, you actually, this is around the time you started doing our holiday cards every year.
Yeah, so DK Vine has a Patreon account, and
dkvine.com/Patreon. Check it out.
yeah, and every year we send all of our patrons a holiday card in the spirit of the holiday cards that Rare has continued to produce over the years. And we actually have extras of these available here with us today. Please meet with us after the show if you'd like one.
It's only January 2nd. It's still the 12 days of Christmas. It counts.
Never been a better time to get a holiday card.
All right, but yeah, around this time too, Rare went through yet another restructuring under a new studio head, Craig Duncan, and they kind of re-embraced a little bit of their heritage while also moving forward on a new path. And part of this was a new logo and also releasing Rare Replay on the Xbox One, which was a collection of 30 previous Rare games, including most of the non-Donkey Kong, non-Pierce Brosnan N64 games they did.
Now, this was announced at E3 2015. It was not the only big announcement Rare had that year.
Right. They announced Sea of Thieves, and Sea of Thieves is a game that I actually we play every week, and yeah, I love this game, but it does have its own connections to the Donkey Kong universe, and also I'm not shilling.
So the sail's blocking my vision, so you're gonna need to tell me where to steer.
I'm looking at the water, Chad. Shut up. I didn't appear in any E3 trailer for the game, so you can trust my opinion. But yeah, so Sea of Thieves, it actually does have lots of connections to this Byzantine shared universe. And
yeah, so in Sea of Thieves, there is, like there was with Viva Pinata, a lot of subtle world building, tying it in with Rare's past projects. There's a Banjo and Kazooie ship cosmetic set you can purchase. All of the item descriptions relate back to Banjo Kazooie in a way that gives them as much in-universe context as you can, considering it takes place in a completely different era than Banjo Kazooie would have. There are also other things included. One of the quests in the game involves constellations with specific names. One of them is a fish constellation called the Glimmer constellation.
That's right, yeah. So yeah, can we get a round of applause for Glimmer the anglerfish from Donkey Kong Country 2? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's the happiest moment of my life right there. No, we actually got confirmation too that they named the constellation after the Donkey Kong animal buddy. So even now, almost 20 years removed from their relationship with Nintendo, they're still finding ways to reference Donkey Kong. They can't quit it.
But as we discussed with Viva Pinata, references and taking place in the same physical universe do not a Donkey Kong universe game make.
No, so the character of Captain Blackeye is a pirate who first appeared in Banjo-Tooie, but he was actually going to be the antagonist of the game Banjo-Kazooie started development as, which is Project Dream. And so we all thought Captain Blackeye was going to appear in Sea of Thieves, and it turns out he does in a roundabout fashion. We mentioned Greg Mayles, who is the lead designer of Donkey Kong Country, Banjo-Kazooie, and also Sea of Thieves. And he's actually playing the game. His pirate avatar is Captain Blackeye. And so if you encounter Captain Blackeye out on the ocean in Sea of Thieves, that's actually being controlled by Greg Mayles, the father of Donkey Kong Country.
We have official word on this.
Yeah.
And Blackeye is not just Greg Mayles' playable avatar. He is referenced in the lore. Characters talk about him. He appears referenced in ancillary material related to the game. The book Tales from the Sea of Thieves.
Right. So also around this time, a bunch of ex-Rare devs led by Gavin Price formed a new studio called Playtonic Games, and in 2015 they announced their formation with a Kickstarter for the game Yooka-Laylee. And we thought, hey, here's this new impressionable studio. We can bully them to put, let's say, a goldfish character in the game that we could then claim is Royston. And what do you know? It worked. So yeah, the character Dr. Puzz, who is kind of the analog in the first game to Mumbo Jumbo, she has a...
Designed by Ed Bryan, who also was the creator of Royston and Mumbo Jumbo.
Right, yeah, he's got a she's got a goldfish character swimming in her head bowl, and we've gotten basically soft confirmation that, yeah, that was the intention. Just, we don't want to incite Bill Gates' lawyers. And Yooka-Laylee has continued this year or last year, yeah, it is January 2nd, with Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, which is a 2.5D platformer, more or less like inspired by Donkey Kong Country games. But this one is filled with a ton of references.
There are quite a few references to Donkey Kong Country in Yooka-Laylee. In this part, thanks to our insider Playtonic, Daley Johnson. Hi, Daley.
Yeah. So, this is a great game. By the way, if you're a Donkey Kong Country fan, you definitely need to check out Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, because it is like the closest thing we've gotten to a Donkey Kong Country 4 from Rare. And I wouldn't be saying that. I would be saying that even if we weren't characters in the game. But that we're not shills. Again, we're not shills. We're completely unbiased. You can trust our opinion. But I think the biggest story for what we do, what we talk about, the Donkey Kong universe, happened this past E3 when we got new character DLC for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And Banjo-Kazooie were finally added to Smash Bros. After 20 years. And this trailer, not only did it bring Banjo-Kazooie into Smash, but it explicitly referenced the fact that they exist in the same world as Donkey Kong, and like the enthusiasm of their old studio stablemates. It was just a magical moment to be able to witness that, and we were actually out at E3 when they announced it, so it was kind of just a moment I'll never forget, and I feel like I can die now. I can actually die and have no regrets. So. Yeah.
We've reached the tail end of our presentation.
Yeah. I just want to stare at that actually for the next 18 minutes. But no, it's weird that like DK Vine started out as a hobby for me in high school, and it went on to become this thing that I couldn't get away from because people wouldn't let me leave it. Every time I would like take a break or try to do something else or have a real job, people kept like saying, no, you got to go back to DK Vine. And eventually I like made my peace with it, and now it's my career, which is stupid. And I haven't actually told my parents. I think they think I'm an accountant or something, but it's fine. And this is really like a magical time, I think, for what we do. Because yeah, we haven't had a Donkey Kong Country game in 6 years, but the fact that we've got like Rare and Playtonic, and there will be a new Donkey Kong game soon. It's happening.
It's too big a brand for there not to be.
Well, there's going to be a Donkey Kong Island section in the Super Nintendo World. Is it World or Land? Super Nintendo World at Universal Theme Parks. They have the minecart coaster, and that's coming in like 2021 or something. 2020, I don't know, but 2022, yeah. It's coming in a couple of years, but yeah, maths is hard. But yeah, this is like a really big time for our community, and just the fact that we now have the developers and people who grew up with these games referencing this kind of stuff in the games themselves, it's surreal. And it's surreal to be doing a panel here at MAGFest.
So we have some pointers now. Good thing you came with us, because you learned some things today that, boy, you're not going to learn just anywhere else. You thought it was going to be a waste of your time, didn't you?
So I think we have some time now for some Q&A. If anybody actually has questions, we might have answers. So, all right.
Please line up single file in front of the microphone.
A lot more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've never actually done crowd control before, so yeah, just line up to the mic.
So considering, see, I'm good? Yeah. So considering for how long you guys have done this, I think there's a chance, considering you've looked on a lot of YouTube stuff, have you heard of these groups? There's Retsupre and Navigator regarding George Wood reviewing Donkey Kong Country from the state of Maryland 1994 broadcasting channel known as Flights of Fantasy. Have you heard of that?
I am actually very familiar with that,
Nice.
Yes.
I want to bring up the legend of George Wood regarding that review. Now, very recently, I have no idea why, there's a Discord on All Things Navigator. Recently, all those videos have been taken down, privated for all those reviews that he did ages ago, maybe for his image and that sort of thing, but the original in its technical form can still be found on Retsupre's channel of that Retsupre of that review.
Yeah, I actually became aware of George Wood thanks to the Twitter account Gaming in the Clinton Years, I think. And there are clips where he basically said, if you don't like Donkey Kong Country, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, that feels good. That feels like a nice, snuggly blanket I can fall asleep into. Thank you, George Wood.
And
better, though.
he does, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
you know,
man.
I'm trying this whole
about that, he does.
positivity thing, so I'll just ignore his other comments.
I highly recommend anybody looks that up. George Wood, Donkey Kong Country, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's worth watching.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
So with the whole Conquer thing where he was like one of the people in Diddy Kong Racing did end up going to jail. If you didn't know who it was, which cast member of Diddy Kong Racing do you think would have ended up in jail?
I think it still would have been Bumper.
Yeah, see, the thing is, Bumper has this animation on the character select screen where he's slapping himself repeatedly, and like you think like Crunch, like maybe because he's a Kremlin, but he has a whole redemption.
K-Rool's not going to hold him accountable.
Yeah, he has this whole redemption arc in the game, so you don't really want to sully that. It might be like Bubbler the Octopus, just because there's something off about him. But at the end of the day, like it could only be Bumper.
I learned something today. Thank you.
That's all right.
I think there were people behind me.
It's all good.
Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, is there anything about the Donkey Kong Country cartoon on your site? Is there anything is there any references to other rare properties in that? And just your general thoughts on that.
There's stuff on the website about the Donkey Kong Country TV show from many years ago.
Yeah, that I wrote as an angry teenager, which I don't really recommend you look up. But so the thing about the Donkey Kong Country, cartoon, I'll say this much: I respect that it brought in so many fans to the property. And looking back on it without my jaded teenage eyes, I can see a fundamental appeal why people would kind of get into it. I was not personally a fan just because I'm like one of those like purist Lord of the Rings fans who said like the Peter Jackson movies were just abominations because Tom Bombadil isn't in there. That's the way I feel about the Donkey Kong Country cartoon. That being said, like when they had those Game Boy Advance cartridges that could play shows of like the Pokemon anime, I was fully prepared if they would have released a Donkey Kong Country show on those cartridges. I was fully prepared to accept that as canon and come up with all the sorts of logical explanations why you never see Bluster Kong in the games.
It's funny you say that because I was actually an impressionable kid when that show came out, and I mean, I think I kind of pretended to dislike it on DK Vine, but as a kid I was into the show, and because I didn't get the concept of disparate continuities, I kept trying to wrap around in my head like, okay, well I guess they grounded up the crystal coconut into like powder, and that's why you can collect like 50 million of them in Donkey Kong 64.
Right. I'll say this about the cartoon. It was instrumental in the Bring Back K-Rool campaign that eventually propelled him to get very close or maybe even winning the Smash ballot, and so he got into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So for that, I'll always be grateful to the cartoon.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
So, this presentation triggered a bizarrely vivid memory in me of a episode of Jimmy Fallon's talk show. Reggie was there to promote Donkey Kong Country Returns, and Jimmy said, you know, he's always goofy and excited about the video games on the show. He was like, oh, I remember playing the last game on the N64. And Reggie stopped and corrected him and told him Super Nintendo, presumably eradicating Donkey Kong 64 from that canon. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
So
we're actually very familiar with that Jimmy Fallon bit. It kind of became an in-joke among us on the site.
Yeah. So in 2010, Reggie Fils-Aimé appeared on, it was then Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and yeah, Jimmy Fallon pretended to know what he was talking about. It was clear that he didn't. He didn't know who Royston was. It's fine, Jimmy Fallon.
There's an account on our forums named Alf, who actually has Jimmy Fallon as his avatar as a joke.
Yeah, but I just remember how painfully awkward that whole bit was, and my power went out. There was a storm, and I had to watch it on this handheld battery-operated TV with an antenna. I was like, I can't miss this, and then I wished I had missed it.
But to answer the question, did they kind of erase Donkey Kong 64? I think in that context, it's because Donkey Kong 64 was not really a Donkey Kong Country game in the sense that it wasn't a 2D/2.5D 2D platformer. It was a very different kind of game in the mold of Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah, I did a recent episode of The Conversation about Donkey Kong 64 and its development history and why it turned out the way it did. It's 4 hours long, though, so I don't really recommend looking it up.
It was so hard for us to get under an hour for this.
All right, yes.
Okay, I know I asked this before, but which Brothers Bear is best?
Okay, so the Brothers Bear from off of Donkey Kong Country 3, there were 13 in the game, and then the Game Boy Advance remake added a 14th Brother Bear, Bachelor. So I go back and forth on which Brothers Bear is the best Brothers Bear. I would say right now I'm leaning towards Bramble Bear. I think this has been a very warm winter. Otherwise I would say Blizzard, but I'm just already ready for spring and I want to see things grow. So Bramble Bear is best.
I'm gonna go with Barnacle Bear.
Oh, okay.
The sympathetic old salt sailor guy who trades, I think it's a seashell for a banana bird.
Yeah, and in the Game Boy Advance remake, he lets his brother Bachelor use his house, and I would never if I had a brother named Bachelor, I would never let him use my house, because what is he going to do in there?
We should probably take this opportunity to mention the bear banished by the rest of the Brothers Bear to the Lost World of Krematoa.
Yes, very timely Brother Bear named Boomer. Back in 1996, even they didn't want anything to do with the Boomers. All right, yes?
What do you guys hope to see in the next Donkey Kong Country game?
Kremlings.
Kremlings and more animal buddies. And look, we're going to see K. Rool. At this point, K. Rool is he's a made man. Smash Brothers is the kingmaker. If you appear in Smash Brothers, that's going to basically affect how your series is presented from then on out. That's why Diddy always has his peanut pop guns now. It's done so much. So yeah, K. Rool's definitely going to be in it, and I just hope we get more animal buddies and more of the just returning characters in general.
So, on the topic of the DK universe,
yes.
I will argue until the day I die that the Donkey Kong Country cartoon is in canon with the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
I don't think I have any problem with that.
So, because in the episode of the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, The Legend of the Crystal Coconut, Donkey Kong claims to have tickets to the Dingling Brothers Circus Show. In the Super Mario Brothers Super Show episode, Gorilla My Dreams, there is a message on the radio claiming that a gorilla has escaped from the Dingling Brothers Circus Show. And another notch on that, the Mario Super Show episode, Gorilla My Dreams, shares the same name as the Donkey Kong Saturday Supercade episode, Gorilla My Dreams. Just saying, Nintendo Cinematic Universe.
All right, I'm going to tweet at Super Mario Wiki right now and tell them that if this information is not on their website, they need to add it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
What's your favorite DKC track and why is it Fear Factory?
From just the original DKC, or
how about all of them?
I think from the originals, just in terms of level themes, because K. Rool's boss themes are always great. I've had a soft spot for Mining Melancholy, which isn't actually the official name. It's a name given by DK Vine's co-founder Chad McCanna that's kind of spread over the years. I think it's only a matter of time before that ends up in an official game. But something I've always loved in both David Wise and Eveline Novacek. I apologize, I have not ever heard her name pronounced correctly. Is when they mix ambient environmental noises and make them part of the instrumental track, and Mining Melancholy has a lot of that with the sound of pickaxes banging against things to form the instrumentation, so I've always had a soft spot for that track.
Yeah, of course, Sticker Bush Symphony, you're going to get run out of town if you don't bring that up. But I also like Forest Interlude from Donkey Kong Country 2. Very, very kind of somber. And like the whole game, like the whole series basically is just filled with like weirdly morose kind of like hauntingly beautiful songs, mostly the work of David Wise. But I also really like Grassland Groove from Tropical Freeze, which is kind of the Lion King kind of riff when you enter the third world. And that's, I think, one of my favorite of the last decade.
I can't help but notice you skipped over 3. You don't like Rockface Rumble?
Look, we could be here all evening and talk about our favorite. Like, I like, there's not a Donkey Kong track I don't like.
I would say of DKC 3, for as much credit as, and rightly so, as Aquatic Ambience gets, Waterworld from DKC 3 is also a really beautiful, haunting song, and I think that DKC 3 might have my favorite water levels in the entire Donkey Kong series.
Thank you.
All right, yes.
All right. So when you explained your universe, you started with Donkey Kong Country. Do you address at all the things Donkey Kong did before those games and the entire mess that is Donkey Kong Jr.?
So we acknowledge it as canon. We don't include it on DK Vine because otherwise we would just be a Mario fan site.
That's
fair. It's basically the prehistory. It is the like foundational. It's Cranky's story, but. We
do subscribe that as detailed in Rare's instruction manual for the original Donkey Kong Country, that Cranky Kong is the arcade Donkey Kong.
Right, and as far as Donkey Kong Jr. goes, very divisive. Basically, our belief is that the modern Donkey Kong pretty much has to be a grown-up Donkey Kong Jr., but that would mean there is a missing generation, and that since Cranky raised him, it would mean his biological mom or dad is dead.
It's kind of us splitting the difference because there are conflicting games that say that Donkey Kong is either Cranky's grandson or his son.
Right, so it's his grandson that he raised as a son.
That until DK Historia comes out,
that
the book is still.
They're not returning my calls on that one, yeah. Yes.
Hi. So piggybacking off of the earlier question, what's your favorite track from the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, and why is it Mirror Never Lies?
It is the Mirror Never Lies.
Excellent.
So yeah, the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, Donkey Kong, we'll give it, Donkey Kong has a lovely singing voice in that cartoon. But it's Mirror Never Lies for me. I don't really know what else to say about it. It's a catchy tune. It's got a pirate voice in it. The actual sequence of Donkey Kong being too dumb to realize that. Have you seen this, Heil?
I'm just going to pass on this whole thing.
In context, Donkey Kong has amnesia, and the character Captain Scurvy, who's, I think they're stand-in for Captain K. Rool, because I think they wanted a Captain K. Rool character, even though they already had King K. Rool in the show, is standing in front of what he says is a mirror, what is actually a hollow frame, and mimics Donkey Kong's moves, trying to convince him he is a pirate crocodile.
I'll take your word for it. All right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
And real quick, one more.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Can you buy like a poster of that image with all the islands anywhere? That's a nice image where you drew out all the islands.
Actually, you can, yes. I have an imprint store. I have a link to it on my Twitter account at @CamRegal, spelled CamReigle.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you for your interest.
Thank you for your interest in DK Vine. Thank you all for attending. This has been a lot of fun. And we're at dkvine.com if you haven't checked us out. And find us on social media, too.